Good morning. It is September 22nd. It's 9:30 in the morning, and this is the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission's weekly meeting. We will start with a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioner Bogue. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Here.
Commissioner Hackett.
Here.
Commissioner McGowan.
Here.
Commissioner Mesner.
Here.
Commissioner Nanjapa.
Here.
Commissioner Robbins.
Here.
Mr. Chair, you have 6 out of 7 commissioners present.
Thank you. That is a quorum. Good morning, everybody. Good to see everybody with us. We've got 23 attendees and the Zoom continues to get populated, so we'll continue to let that happen. The first order of our agenda today is general public comment. We had 2 people sign up for general public comment, Joanne Hackus and Sandra Dugan. So while Ms. Larson is looking for those 2 individuals, I will also note that we received a number of written public comments, which the commissioners have read. 1 from Joyce Lisbon, 2 written comments from Marie Venner, 1 written public comment from Shoshana Dean, 1 written comment from Kate Christensen, and 1 written comment from Isaac Chesler. So all of those are part of our record, and we have reviewed them and appreciate the public for taking time to provide written public comment. With that, Ms. Larson, were you able to locate either Ms. Hackus or Ms. Dugan?
Mr. Chair, I am looking for them. Currently, I'm not seeing either. One moment. Joanne may be in.
If either of those individuals is with us, if they want to raise their hand.
Hello?
To identify them. Hello.
I'm here.
Ms. Hackus, good morning. Thank you for being with us. You signed up for public comment. You have 3 minutes for your public comment. We've got a timer on the screen so that you can see it. We can hear you and see you, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Okay. I'm Conservation Board member of Evergreen Audubon and Vice President of the Audubon Colorado Council. Thank you for putting the health and safety of Coloradans first as we await updated draft rules for the financial insurance rulemaking. When oil and gas wells are abandoned, we find ranchers and farms left with rusting equipment, unplugged wells that are leaking gases, failing well casings, contaminating drinking water, billions required from Colorado taxpayers to repair the damage, an environment no longer suitable for plant growth, birds, insects, even the pronghorn or the elk. BLM says offices will ensure that any shut-in well that is no longer capable of producing our own gas in paying quantities and has no beneficial use will be timely and properly plugged, and abandoned and associated service disturbance will be timely and properly reclaimed. There are at least 16,000 wells in Colorado that produce less than a barrel of oil per day, according to your own data. The threshold of 1 barrel per day was used for the definition of inactive wells in your straw dog rules, released in July. Around 36,000 wells produce less than 15 barrels per day. They're often called stripper wells. Colorado's facing a crisis. We have lots and lots of low-producing wells, almost 50% of our wells, but we have outdated reclamation bonding requirements, allowing backroom companies to shift the cleanup costs to the public. In 2018, BLM held $204 million in bonds for their wells. Cost of cleanup is estimated at $6.1 billion. These abandoned wells on federal lands are bad enough. Colorado needs to do much, much better. Idle wells are dangerous. A mechanical integrity test every 1 to 2 years is needed to determine if an idle well is even capable of producing. If the equipment is run down, the well should be shut down. If the well is not pumping, it is more likely to be leaking endangering citizens. We urge you to ensure that an operator has sufficient financial assurity to shut down a well and restore the environment. Review that assurity annually. Require a cash bond, not some vague financial claims. Remember, Colorado taxpayers don't want to be left with the bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hackos, for your comments. We appreciate you being with us this morning.
Thank you very much.
Ms. Larson, were you able to find Ms. Dugan?
I'm not able to locate her.
Okay. Why don't we move on, and then if we're able to locate her at a later time during the meeting, we can reopen that last segment of public comment. I would note for the record that Commissioner Bogue is now with us. Good morning, good to see you. Thanks for being with us. So with that, we have next on our agenda, staff presentation on staff's implementation of mission change rules, part 1. Maybe turn to, I'm not sure who from staff is going to be delivering this piece to us.
So, Mr. Chair, you'll be hearing from several of the managers of COGCC, and Mr. Cuthbertson, our Deputy Director, will kick this off. So give us a moment while we bring folks in, and we can get this ready to go.
Sounds great. This is exciting. We have a whole slew of our managers. Look like everybody coded and tied up today. Excellent. Just let us know when you've got everybody on board.
Mr. Chair, I think we do have everyone in the meeting.
And I see that Mr. Cuthbertson is unmuted, so I will turn this over to him to get us going.
Thank you very much, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
We can. We can see
All
you.
right, thank you. I'm going to just share a presentation that's going to serve as an outline for us, if I could.
That would be great.
If I can remember how to do this. There it is. So good morning. As Chair indicated, my name is Scott Cuthbertson. I'm Deputy Director of Operations. And on behalf of our management team, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to update you on the progress we've made regarding the implementation of the rule changes made effective January 15th of this year, 2021. I have asked each manager to give you an overview of their respective areas just so that they can speak to you directly and that they can be available for any questions you might have. Our presentation is fairly informal, however, so I would just let the chair know that if you'd like to ask questions as we go, we're certainly open to that, or if you want to wait till the end, it's completely up to your discretion, and I'll just let you break in, let the commissioners or you break in as you feel the need to do so. I'm going to begin with just an update on our structural changes, but before I do, I just want to say again how very thankful I am for the professionalism and passion for excellence that I have seen throughout our organization during a very tumultuous year. Our managers set the example for that, and I could not be more thankful for their energy and devotion to this agency. Just want to start with some organizational aspects of the changes that we've made to maybe better serve in light of the rule changes and in just the nature of just continuously trying to improve our processes and service. I'll begin with some observations. In reviewing our organizational structure, especially in light of the changed rules, there were some fairly evident observations that we've made. Even before the rule changes, our financial assurance process needed more support, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. The permitting and technical services unit manager and compliance unit manager had what I considered to be an unsustainable number of job duties and direct reports. And so we were looking for ways to give them the space to be more effective in their leadership and with less job responsibilities in terms of the varied types of job duties that we were asking them to perform. The oil and gas location assessment had advanced to a primary role in the permitting process, and the ever-increasing demands on the technology team, both internal and external, require more support than, in my estimation, a manager is reasonably able to provide, who is also responsible for the permitting process. We have 2 full-time employees. Sometimes you'll hear them referred to as FTE. We have 2 FTE allocated to our financial assurance group. I say allocated because from the summer of 2019 until last fall, our financial assurance supervisor, Deborah Lutz, was working single-handed due to budget shortfalls associated with the pandemic and the subsequent production downturn. In October of last year, after months of trying to figure out how to best support that team and that service that we provide, we moved the financial assurance from the permitting and technical services unit to the finance unit in the hopes that the complementary subject matter and access to accounting staff could provide a better level of support. I believe that move and some other process changes that Finance Manager Jarrett Ellis will touch on in just a minute have improved our ability to better meet the needs of that group. When we look at our permitting and technical services unit, this is where the bulk of the changes are focused. As I already mentioned, and as you'll hear more about this morning, our GIS, applications development, and data management team has played an enormous role in the implementation of the rule changes. The criticality of that team and the need to reduce the number of direct reports the permitting and technical services manager was supporting have prompted us to bifurcate that unit into a standalone information and applied technology unit and a new permitting unit. As outlined on this slide, our data management, GIS, and information processing groups will have a new manager. HR will post the position announcement to hire that manager next week. Filling that needs provides space for the permitting manager to continue to support the permit completion specialist and to begin supporting the oil and gas location assessment process. The permit manager will also have the primary liaison duties to the hearings application process and will be responsible for final approval of all drilling permit applications. I cannot imagine trying to accomplish all that this team accomplished this last year had we not had the outstanding services of our permitting and technical services manager, Jane Stanzik. Jane's command of our rules and processes, coupled with an unmatched work ethic and commitment to excellence, is invaluable. While I think Director Murphy has already communicated, Jane will be retiring this fall. All I can tell you is that I cannot imagine COGCC without Jane Stanzik. Nonetheless, it is my sad duty to try and hire someone to take the reins that she has so deftly wielded. To that end, HR either posted or will post today the announcement to hire our next permitting manager, and we hope to have both a new permitting manager and new information applied technology manager in place by early October, so that they can have as much time as possible to glean the wealth of institutional knowledge that Jane has before she leaves. Combining the permit completion specialist and oil and gas location specialist into a new permitting unit frees up some capacity in our environmental manager. Our reclamation group is currently part of our compliance unit, however, is perhaps more closely aligned in terms of job duties to the environmental specialists in the environmental unit than they are to our inspection or enforcement teams. As a result, moving reclamation to the environmental unit provides both some symmetry of job duties and more equitably distributes the supervisory duties of the compliance and environmental unit managers. The result is a compliance unit comprised of inspection teams and an enforcement team, and an environmental unit made up of environmental protection specialists and reclamation specialists. With that, I'll turn the presentation over to Engineering Manager Dave Andrews, unless there's any questions that I can answer.
I'm looking around to fellow commissioners for any questions. The only thing I'd like to do is, if Jane Stanzik is with us, if she could appear, I want to echo the kudos from you to Ms. Stanzik. I just would relate that when I took the job as director in early 2019, Jane was 2 doors down from me and served as a solid rock, assisting a neophyte in trying to understand what being director was for this agency. She was there late in the evenings when I didn't have a clue what was going on, and served as a solid bedrock in assisting me in what I'm doing. I can only echo the importance that Ms. Stanzik has been to this commission over the course of her career, and how grateful and wonderful she was in embracing some of the changes, which I know were not at all times, welcome, but you did a great job with all of that, Jane. And so look forward to hopefully seeing if we can harness and meld your understanding of all things commission into whomever will replace you, but they've got big shoes to fill. So thank you very much for all the great work that you've done for the commission. And we look forward to all the best in whatever you do next. So we'll look forward to hearing from you later today, but I didn't want to miss that opportunity to send out my thoughts and love for the great work that you've done. So thank you. And with that, Dave, now you got to follow up. So.
Thank you, Chair Robbins and Jane. We will certainly miss you. Good morning, commissioners. Today, I'd like to focus on some key changes to process and data related to the mission change rules, and before that, the wellbore integrity rules. Starting with the latter, operators have begun to submit diagnostic test data and pressure management plans for wells that exceed the pressure gradient threshold. Year over year, the volume of Bradenhead test reports is up, but we are expecting a large number of reports during the next couple of months. And that's because the effective date of the wellbore integrity rules was November 2nd. So our guidance document requires that operators complete their tests before November 2nd of this year. Operators are also, as a result of new rules, not allowed to keep the Bradenhead valve open other than during testing and mitigation. While that normally did not amount to a significant amount of emissions from the well, that did result in some decrease for wells that were in that condition. Next slide, please. For our Class 2 UIC program, US EPA completed the review of revisions related to the new 800 series rules, and they approved those revisions in July. He may not be on here, but big thanks to Joel Miner for that effort. He put a lot of work into translating what we had done with the new 800 series rules into the revision application for EPA.
Hey, Dave, can I interrupt real quick? Can you explain how it is that the EPA is responsible for reviewing the work that we did and sort of sanctioning it, making sure they were, like, just to the layperson, give a little more understanding of that process?
Sure. It was a little bit of a chicken and egg situation where we had to get the rules in place and adopted and effective and actually running for a couple of months as like input to that application program for the revision. So once we, got through that step of a first couple of months of operation, we were able to submit the application package to EPA, and that's essentially their blessing of those 800 series rules. And that was on July 30th.
And that's because EPA has delegated that authority to us, is that correct?
That's correct. COGCC has primacy to operate the Class 2 UIC program for EPA.
Excellent. Director Murphy, did you have something? I see you've shown up.
I showed up even though I'm the least suited up person here to answer if you're asking about kind of the overlay of the Safe Drinking Water Act and underground injection control well programs are generally regulated by EPA, although states can apply to EPA based on their regulatory requirements to achieve what's called primacy. And the state then has the authority to regulate that particular class of underground injection control wells. And in this example, there are I think 6 classes of wells. COGCC has achieved primacy for class 2 wells. The other class of wells that gets incorporated into the conversation quite often around what the work that this agency is doing are class 6 wells, and that's for carbon sequestration. But I wasn't quite sure if you wanted process, which is what Dave was talking about, or kind of that larger regulatory framework.
I think you've both done a good job of providing some additional perspective around both of those processes. So thank you.
Thank you. Let's see, last for our orphan well program, the impact of changes, the significant impact for us were the changes to the environmental rules. Our staff or consultants now prepare Form 27s, which are site investigation and remediation work plans, ahead of work. So before we commence any excavation activities, either around the well to prepare it for plugging, during removal of flow lines and decommissioning of production equipment. So now we have those plans up front. We have our sampling locations ahead of time before that work commences. And that has resulted in an additional cost as far as hiring consultants and retaining laboratories for the analysis. However, overall, it improves our documentation on closure of orphan sites. And with that, that's the end of my presentation, but I'd be happy to take any other questions.
Any questions? I'm not seeing any, so we'll move over to Mr. Leonard.
Thank you, Dave. Good morning, Commissioners. Mike Leonard. In addition to our field staff, the largest group of eyes and ears in the field for the COGCC, they're going through the new rules. Obviously, a lot of the old rules were moved over into new spaces. For some of us that have been around for a while, that can be slightly confusing, trying to find the new rule or the old rule in the new space, but we're working through that as a staff and moving along rather well. We had a lot of calls, a lot of conversations, even with guidance out, operators, verifying what work under the new rules requires pre-notification and who that notification goes to. Some of that's for the move-in rig up notifications that we now get for well servicing rigs. We have a lot of those coming in, and along with that, some over-reporting has caused some confusion. For instance, early on, we had a couple operators. We had one operator in particular that had submitted about 300 duplicate reports. And as our field staff gets those reports in their inbox every day, it does get pretty tough to sort them out. I think we've worked with the operators and got a lot of those duplicate reporting slowed, if not completely stopped. One of the other areas that we've done a lot of work in is with the smaller operators who are, they express frustration with the number of notices being required, not being required before, and some of them with their ability, small staffs, just getting into e-forms and getting those notices out there can tie them up somewhat. With that, I'll take any questions. And
any questions from commissioners?
Mike, sorry, Chair.
Go ahead.
Can I prompt you just a little bit, Mike? And I know we covered this just recently with the risk-based inspection program, but I think that that's a space where we can look to make some changes as well. And if you don't mind recapping a little bit from last week or 2 weeks ago, I can't remember now. I think that'd be great to close the loop on a little bit.
Yeah, and we've had a couple more meetings since I presented to you commissioners a couple weeks ago. moving forward with a more robust risk-based program. One thing I think I failed to mention in that last meeting was we're breaking this down amongst the units. So each group, so the compliance unit, the environmental unit, the flow line group, the reclamation group will have their own layers and their own risk assessments and risk scores, so that we can score more than just the well and the location. We can actually start scoring some facilities, start inspecting, not start inspecting because we have been inspecting, but have a better plan forward to inspect flow lines, remediation projects, just to give a couple of examples. We're gathering a lot of information right now. I know our spreadsheet is growing daily with ideas that are coming in, and it's going to be a very good program, I think, as we move forward. I do know that some of the information that's coming in may change over time, and that's fine, I think, because we have developed this program so that it's flexible, and hopefully within 2 to 3 months we can come back and give you a report as to maybe a trial product as we move forward.
Great, thank you, Mr. Leonard, for that. I think I see Mr. Duranlo is up next.
Good morning, Chair Robbins and Commissioners. Thanks for having all of us managers here today. It's important that we occasionally put on a tie. So I'm Greg Duranlo. I'm the manager of the environmental unit, which, as Scott mentioned, contains the environmental protection specialist team and the oil and gas location assessment team for the time being. So I'll talk about both those groups. And I'll ask for your forgiveness in advance. I may be a little bit long-winded because really the changes to the 900 series that I'll talk about first are pretty darn significant. There are some obvious examples of implementation that you're already familiar with in the 900 series rules. For example, the Director's 901A order, which you heard discussed over the last couple of days. This rule has provided clear authority for the Director to compel action, and its first use so far has been effective. The clear and concise requirements of Rule 902 to prevent pollution provides unambiguous enforcement authority in the event of spills and releases, so that we are not left quibbling over paperwork violations. We're talking about actual impacts. The COGCC is now clearly able to assert a rule violation where adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources result from oil and gas operations. So these two more general rules are an excellent foundation for the rest of the rule changes, and a few that are shown here on the slide that I'll discuss in more detail. First, the overhaul of the requirements for facility closure has had really notable effects on work and workload. As you are aware, in the past, only pits and partially buried produced water vessels required an approved site investigation and remediation work plan, or Form 27, prior to closure. And Dave Andrews mentioned this with the Orphan Well program. Now, we're requiring the submittal of a Form 27 for all oil and gas facilities, including the wellheads during plugging and abandonment. The two types of facilities that we previously addressed are common sources of contamination, and the removal and cleanups provided clear environmental benefits. Demonstrated in COGCC's 2014 risk-based inspections report, it identified historical spills as a significant contributor to oil and gas related pollution. And facility closure was an opportune time for increased inspections to identify and address historical contamination. So this addition of the requirement for the pre-approval of a Form 27 for all facility closures has really been an effective tool, and the results of that were nearly immediately felt following January 15th of this year. Several operators with large plug-in and abandonment programs, especially in the DJ Basin, significantly increased their volumes of Form 27s, certainly giving environmental staff much more work, but also a much better picture of where and when facility closure operations were taking place, and providing the opportunity for inspection and oversight during those activities. And importantly, the involvement of operators, environmental staff, or consultants in the plug-in and facility closure, rather than just the operations staff, resulted in an increase in reported spills. And so you may ask, well, how is this a good thing, right? Like, we're having more spills. Why is that a positive result from these rules? And what it means is that spills around wellheads, tanks, and separators are now reported and cleaned up in accordance with our rules, and that work is fully documented. And I don't want to imply that the cleanup wasn't being done before, but there was no visibility to that work. Now, one of our environmental protection specialists can inspect and verify that the work is done in accordance with the approved work plan and that the site is clean. It also provides operators with the assurance that they won't be called back to a site following a landowner complaint down the road, because they've got documentation now of the clean closure. Since we've begun tracking this, and through July of this year, we've documented 118 spills reported just to the wellhead, 18 spills to separators, and 21 to flow lines or dump lines, all during facility closure. The wellhead spills, which amount to about 20 a month, are particularly important to note. In the past, a plugging contractor may observe a spill during cutting and capping operations and excavate and remove the soil, but it would not be reported. There'd be no documentation other than maybe some waste manifests that were kept in the operator's files. Now, that operation is conducted with environmental health and safety oversight. The spill is documented, soil is removed, and confirmation samples are collected and analyzed, demonstrating proper cleanup. These aren't necessarily huge volume spills, but they are a significant part of the legacy of oil and gas operations that staff is very happy to be addressing in this manner now. Moving on to the changes in Rule 912, they've also increased the work volume and overall number of reported spills. But again, that represents an improvement in the transparency and provides for better oversight by our environmental protection staff. These changes to the reporting threshold for spills that daylight to the surface or where spill volumes are unknown reduce ambiguity and delays. The operator is not left wondering if a spill or release is reportable. Their roustabout crews can see spills and notify the environmental staff immediately, and the spill can be reported to this agency. COGCC can then review the site and mobilize to provide oversight if warranted. At the end of the day, the result is a documented cleanup with a sign-off from the agency, so a net benefit to both the environment and the operator. And then the last rule I'll touch on here is 913E, which requires quarterly updates for ongoing investigation and remediation. This is a fairly typical requirement for environmental work, and the lack of this reporting mandate has likely allowed projects that we oversee to become stale over the years, where neither the responsible party or the regulator is actively managing or keeping track of the cleanup. In some cases, all that was necessary was the submission of analytical data or a closure request, so the work was completed, but no one was bird dogging the closure. This requirement has led to a significant surge of Form 27s starting in April, and staff is dealing with a backlog of those forms. But we also know that several sites were closed simply because of this reporting requirement, because the operator did rekindle that project and get the necessary documentation submitted. Next slide, please, Scott. So this slide provides some data showing Form 27s and Form 19 initial spill reports year over year just for the month of July. The table on the left shows the forms received statewide, And you can see significant percentage increases from 2020 to 2021. Over 100% increase in total Form 27s and over 400% increase in initial Form 27s have certainly kept staff scrambling to keep up. Additionally, you can see the 63% increase in initial Form 19s, and we believe this to be largely attributed to the spills reported during facility closure that previously went unreported. Many of these are small volume spills and releases right around the wellhead, as I discussed, and at flow line risers and near separators. On the right, the bar graph shows the change in forms processed from July 20 to July 2021, separated by our eastern and western regions. The negative change in spills on the west slope compared to the positive change on the east slope is illustrative of the spills identified during facility closure. Next slide, please, Scott. The result of all this is an increase in active remediation projects statewide. In both graphs shown here for the western slope and the eastern plains, you can see a marked increase in total active remediation projects with the turn beginning in January with the effective date of the mission change rules. So both sides of the state have seen more now active remediation projects. We are hoping that we will now also, as some of these are shorter term remediation projects and we get closure on those facility closures, that we'll start to see a leveling off of that. But as you can see by this data, we haven't seen that yet. And next slide, please, Scott. Now I'll turn to the oil and gas location assessment team and describe some examples of the impacts of the mission change rules as we've been implementing them. First, in several places, the rules now include a phrase such as, the director will review the oil and gas location where the well is located to ensure that necessary and reasonable conditions of approval are applied to protect and minimize adverse impacts to public health, safety, welfare, the environment, and wildlife resources. Two examples of this language are in Rule 312D and Rule 435A for subsequent operations and well plugging, respectively. COGCC is implementing this review through its OGLA team, applying the expertise of that work group to the operations that were previously carried out without that consideration. An obvious situation where this has been impactful is with respect to the protection of wildlife resources. Noting the additional high priority habitats, or HPH, we've been able to work with the operator and CPW to ensure operations take place at an appropriate time of the year. One specific example is when an operator with vertical wells proposed their plugging to allow for another operator to conduct hydraulic fracturing operations on their horizontal wells. And an active bald eagle nest was identified in close proximity to the vertical well by the operator's biological consultant. COGCC, in consultation with CPW and the operators, contacted the operator with the horizontal wells, and they agreed to delay their completions until the eagles had left the nest. When the eagles cleared the nest, the operator of the vertical wells reported burrowing owl in nests adjacent to the vertical well location. So following additional consultant with both CPW and both operators, the plugging and completions were again delayed. The cooperation among operators and agencies resulted in appropriate restrictions of operations to provide the best possible protection for those raptors. In a similar example, an operator had operations planned for last winter, but identified a bald eagle nest not previously mapped and delayed their workover. Near the end of the winter timing restriction recommended by CPW, the operator surveyed the nest, identified that the eaglet had left the nest, and thus commenced their operations after the timing stipulation was over. Another significant change for the OGLA team has been the increased coordination with local governments. And nowhere is this more apparent than in Weld County, where the county has not only exercised its 1041 authority declaring unincorporated Weld County to be an area of state interest for oil and gas development, but they've also adopted a robust set of rules governing the siting and operations around oil and gas. Because their permit process typically precedes ours, even if they're filed concurrently, COGCC and Weld County are engaged in pre-application planning meetings with operators and with the county, consistent with Rule 302G. And we are working closely with their staff to determine which WOGLA, or Weld Oil and Gas Location Assessment, permit attachments can be used directly to satisfy the substantially equivalent provision in Rule 304E. This effort to increase consistency between state and local permits will, over time, result in improved efficiency and better transparency. Of course, there are some growing pains right now, but we're engaged in weekly meetings with Weld County staff to work through these processes. So I'm happy to take questions on any information that I've presented, and thank you again for the opportunity to present today.
Thank you, Mr. Geronimo. I really appreciate the breadth and depth of the information that you've just provided us. You know, you and I had a discussion, I don't know, a couple months ago about your environmental team's appreciation of the enhanced reviews and enhanced ability to ensure protection of the environment as a result of new reporting, et cetera. And, you know, that's something that's happening sort of, you know, behind the scenes at our agency. And I really think it's critical for our stakeholders to understand the breadth and depth of what the new sets of rules, the new reporting requirements, the new enhanced environmental oversight that gives your group, whether it's, you know, reclamation of an area or the increased notification with regard to spills. I think it's just, it's super critical, it's super important, and it's not something that gets daylighted that much. And so I really wanted to appreciate you and your group. I really appreciate your environmental protection specialist work. I think it's awesome. And I think that it's just really, really a positive development that I want folks to be aware of. You know, we get so many folks that come in and say, you've got to stop, or you can't do this, or you can't do that. Well, there's a lot of things that are happening at the agency as a result of the new rules that I really wanted to see daylighted. So my appreciation to you and your group for embracing this. And I know it's been a ton more work, and you guys are overworked to begin with, but I think it's super critical. I appreciate the leadership of Scott on that as well. And I guess the other piece that I wanted to comment to is appreciate the efforts of your team to implement the Weld County COGCC MOU. You know, we started that MOU back when I was director, and to try to coordinate their 1041 approach to local permitting. We amended that once we had the new rules in place. I've been in contact at a high level with their county attorney, and he has relayed to me that I think there's an agreement. There's been some stumbles, but just, you know, some growing pains. But you know, the feedback that I get from their attorney to me as chair is that this is starting to work. The identification of areas where there could be substantial equivalent information is a positive thing. So again, I just I know the workload on all of the teams has been vastly greater, and I know on your OGLA team, but I applaud the efforts, and I hope that things will start as we move into sort of second and third rounds of permitting. Things are seen to be in a better place. So I don't have any questions. I just wanted to extend my thanks to you and your group for all the efforts that you're doing.
Well, I really appreciate that comment, Chairman, and I certainly appreciate the acknowledgement of the work that staff is doing. It has been a big lift. They've been extremely busy and working extremely hard, and as you mentioned, incredibly diligent and passionate about the work that they do. And so I do certainly appreciate the acknowledgement. In fact, I think one of the things that triggered this discussion was the identification by our staff of those sort of 118 spills around the wellheads, and where, you know, we really see a direct result of the implementation of the rules where spills are being reported, where in the past, again, they may or may not have been dealt with, but they certainly weren't reported, and there was no positive oversight. So, and our staff is doing that. They're tracking their work. They're looking at those things. They're seeing those trends in the data and saying, hey, this is meaningful. This is important, and this is valuable. So, it really is a testament to the work that staff is doing. Likewise with the OGLA team, reaching out to Weld County. We're working through the different plans that are required on the oil and gas development plan application in the Form 2A, and looking closely at our requirements and Weld County's requirements, and where is the overlap, and how can we work together and cooperatively, which is, frankly, a new paradigm. In the past, that we haven't had that relationship with local governments necessarily. And so, really rolling up their sleeves and figuring out how that works is going to pay dividends in the long run.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent points. And I want to just sort of double down on that point about the 118 spills that previously, you wouldn't have known about. I'm just putting out there that doesn't mean that operators are sloppier now. It just means that there's more reporting, which establishes that we've got more environmental oversight to ensure that the cleanup is consistent with our rules and regulations. So it's overall a very positive thing. So again, Mr. Arnold, thank you for your leadership. Really appreciate the insight into your work groups. And I agree. I think we should have this sort of approach, maybe like quarterly or something, so that we can learn from you and allow all of our stakeholders to see what's going on behind the scenes that is positive. So thanks again.
Thanks for your time.
Are you up?
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm Jane Stanzik, and I have a little bit of information for you, nothing compared to what has come just before me, but so the biggest change that the permitting group saw from the new rules is the fact that the Form 2s, the applications for permits to drill, are filed after the approval of the location and spacing. This will make processing the Form 2s much more efficient. Staff won't be looking at forms that are going to be held up because they have a difficult location or contested spacing. So there won't be delays waiting for that to be approved. And hopefully we won't see a backlog that we saw in the past of over 6,000 Form 2s waiting to be approved. Right now, we only have 112 Form 2s in process. And since the new rules went into effect, we've approved a little over 500 Form 2s. So that's the biggest impact on the permitting group. Next slide, please, Scott.
Ms. Kansas, can I interrupt? Sorry.
Yeah, sure.
Just the review of the Form 2s for previous locations that have already been approved, right? The 2A was approved
Yes.
probably prior to 181 rules going into effect. Can you speak to the fact that the rules now require sort of a conscious dive into insurance and protection of public health, safety, welfare in the Form 2 piece? I just want to get that out there so that people understand that it's not just, this one's approved and this one's approved, but there is a little bit of a dive there, right?
There is. Yes, those Form 2s are reviewed by the OGLA group, and what they're reviewing is the location. They're not looking at the well, it's the proposed well. They're looking at the location. And you're right, Commissioner or Chairman Robbins, that those 2As were approved prior to the new rules, though many of them were approved with the SB 19-181 Director's Objective Criteria. So they were, they had that elevated review, but they're still being reviewed by the OGLA staff and looking again at protections and in some cases requiring conditions of approvals to be added to those locations prior to the approval of the Form 2s to actually drill the wells and conduct those operations on the locations.
Thank you for that clarification and edification. Appreciate it.
For the our information data folks, the work that they've done to implement the new rules, before SB 19181 and the emission change rules, we used 34 forms to regulate the industry. 25 of those had to be revised to update them for the new requirements in the emission change rules. And along with adding the new requirements, we took advantage of the fact that the forms were being updated to add some clarification to improve the quality of the forms that the operators file and the data that is submitted on those forms. Next slide, please, Scott. And the other change was that the emission change rules required the creation of 4 additional forms. And these are the forms, 2 of them are the Form 2B and the Form 2C were necessary for the new OGDP, Oil and Gas Development Plan, approval application and approval process. The Form 9 is for the transfer of operatorship, that it greatly increased the review of all related, not just facilities, but any outstanding incidents related to a well or location that's proposed for transfer to a new operator, which is a great improvement over our old process. And then the Form 45 is a report after a location has been constructed. This will facilitate inspections and reclamation compliance. We never had the visibility for when a location was constructed. We only knew when a well had been drilled on the location. So this is an increase in reporting that will help our overall environmental and reclamation reviews. And that's all I had. Any questions?
Thank you, Ms. Stanzik. I think Scott has a question.
No questions, no hot seat for you, Miss Jane.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to maybe provide some color commentary here. We talk about using forms, and I know that the commission has heard input from operators over the past months about, the forms are unwieldy, or they're, why do we have to submit a form? How come I can't just pick up the phone and call you? Or how come you can't just take an email or whatever? I think one of the key values of the elegant system that the commission has in place that began way before me, it's been in process for over a decade, thanks to the vision of some folks like Jane's predecessors and our current data management team, Ken Robertson and Ishan Lin and Josue Perez and others. One of the key aspects of our data, of our administration, is our data transparency. Anyone can see all of our information about anything except for things that are just in process, right? When an application comes in and we're processing it to try to make sure that it has all the right stuff in it, and then once we pass that in-process review task, then the public can even see those applications that are being made well in advance of any action being taken on them. We have millions of rows of data in our database. It is a complex but elegant solution. But the only way that you can maintain that transparent and complex solution is if you ingest information in a digital format, right? I can't just have somebody email me, because now that email is just in my inbox and it's not available to the public unless I take the time to print it out or maybe to plug it in or to transfer it somehow into the database. And so, you know, I think it's to everybody's interest to just sort of recognize and appreciate that when we talk about forms, we're talking about a metaphor really for a very complex digital user interface that we transmit millions of fields of information between all of the operators and the interested parties. Complaints come in that way. Everything we do is managed in that digital environment so that it can be well managed, but also so that it can be immediately available and we can offer that transparency to anybody who wants to know anything about anything. So I just wanted to add that color commentary. We've gotten used to the term form like it's almost a magic incantation. It does take an incredible amount of work and support to maintain that digital user interface that we refer to as a form. And so, again, I just can't express enough appreciation to the work that that tech team has done this last year to maintain that data integrity and continue to provide it transparently to anyone who has any interest in seeing it. So thanks for letting me add that.
Yeah, no, really appreciate that additional information about the wealth of the data that we have and our ability to use it and allow for others to see it. So thank you, Scott. Really appreciate that. Yeah. All right. I think Megan Castle may be up next with a overview of where things are at with community relations.
Hey, good morning, and thank you for this opportunity. I am here because Senate Bill 181 actually provided for a communications position at COGCC. So the work being done to implement mission change is just part of the overall work and the good work that's being done that we want to communicate with all of our stakeholders. And I just wanted to share that, you know, really our communication is fortunately really digitally focused, especially with the past year or more with the pandemic, that we have our website and our other digital tools, including like Constant Contact, that we wanted to just highlight how we're using these tools to make sure that all of our diverse stakeholders are able to access content, to get the timely content and updates to them. And then talking about our website, it's really important that, you know, we look at our website. It serves a lot of different stakeholders, and so we want to always provide the most current updating of content, but also provide help resources. So for folks that may be coming to this for first time, that they can get that information and help themselves to locate what content and information they're seeking. So one of the recent improvements that just happened this week was on a Quora page that was added, and it's got FAQs, it's got a form to fill out so that we can better track that. It's just part of our overall improvements as far as providing information. And it also goes to the approach of having a comprehensive customer service to all of our different stakeholders. So one exciting announcement that has recently happened is that Megan Adamchuk, who has been working in complaints, is now working along with me, and she is our customer service / local government representative and community representative. She brings a great depth of experience along with having served in this complaints role. She also is very familiar with the website. So many of you have interacted with her already, learning how to use the website, and she's a great resource for that. But in this role, she's going to help us also reach out to local governments And we've recently updated that webpage with her new content, or with new content and her contact. And I see that her role is going to augment my role as far as with media. And then the two of us will be working with local governments, community groups, and I just want to point out that we've had great support from everybody at the COGCC. So I want to thank everybody and know that we're here as a resource to help get the word out, and to anything that we can do to improve that, we are happy to hear. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Castle, for the update with regard to your department. I would note to the world at large that your department did not exist before your arrival, and I think that it is wonderful for the commission to have this dedicated department on. Well, we had a community relations department, but we didn't have a public information officer and someone that can work with folks to get the word out in terms of what we're doing or how we're doing it. And so I think combining all this is great. And so thanks for that update as well from your end.
Thank you.
And I see Mr. Ellis is with us now, perhaps to speak to the financial unit. Good to see you, Jarrett.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. Thank you for the chance to provide updates from the Finance Unit in regard to your mission change rules. The Finance Unit includes the budget, accounting, purchasing and procurement, and financial assurance sections. As Deputy Director Cuthbertson mentioned, by transitioning the Financial Assurance Unit to the Financial Assurance section, rather, to the Finance Unit, we were able to add a half FTE to augment the financial assurance activities. The primary changes that we've seen from the new rules affecting the Financial Assurance Unit is from the adoption of the new Form 9, the transfer of operatorship. This new form helps to ensure compliance and clearly identify responsibility for facilities and incidents related to the wells that are to be transferred. Rule 218 clarifies requirements for transfer and eliminates the subjectivity and potential points of conflict that we've had. This makes staff reviews of the forms more straightforward and less contentious. In the past, transfers of operations were subject to a bifurcated process with responsibility shared by both the production and the financial assurance sections. The Finance Unit and the Tech Services Unit are currently collaborating. We're working to define, streamline, and consolidate the form review and the approval process into the financial assurance section. And that's really the sum of the effects of of the mission change in the finance section.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ellis, and good to have you on board with us. Any questions? All right, seeing none, we can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next up, I will be delivering some comments about the changes that have affected the hearings unit as a result of Senate Bill 19-181. So as you commissioners are well aware, the result of Senate Bill 19-181 was to implement a full-time commission. And with that full-time commission, we've had the opportunity on the hearing side to help improve our processes to achieve greater transparency for the public. And our work has been refocused to support that full-time commission in its mission, and to ensure that our stakeholders have greater access to the hearings process and to the work that occurs on a day-to-day basis here. We have undertaken some efforts to improve our website, the hearings website, to ensure that we have guidance documents out there that provide the public with information on how to access and use the e-filing system. The e-filing system is a relatively new tool that we've been able to implement to allow greater access to all of the hearing documents that are filed with the dockets that come before us. We've also improved the website to include public and operator toolboxes. So those toolboxes include how-tos, guidance, and other resources that give the public and operators more information and hopefully improve their access to our processes here in the hearings unit. Next slide, please. So some of the more significant changes that occurred as a result of 181, you've heard about in the other units, specifically within the permitting and in the environmental units. Those changes there have also had an impact on the hearings unit. So for instance, we now have oil and gas development plans. Those are permits, essentially, that begin with the permitting and OGLA sections, and must also then be considered by the full commission. So not in addition to the permits that are filed with the permitting and OGLA groups, there is a hearing application that is filed for that OGDP. So with that OGDP hearing application, there's the opportunity for the public to participate more fully in that process. You'll see here on the slide, we have a note about affected persons. Prior to Senate Bill 19-181, the opportunity for members of the public to protest an application, whether that was a spacing application or a pooling application, they were generally limited. And certainly there was not the opportunity for members of the public to protest a permit, because permits were not actually heard by or approved by the full commission. So with the changes that have resulted in our rules as a result of 181, we now have the opportunity for individuals who are affected by proposed oil and gas development through an OGDP to come in and be what we term an affected person, someone who lives within a certain radius of a proposed oil and gas location may automatically be an affected person, and they would have the opportunity to come in and protest the plan. And even if someone did not live within close proximity to the proposed location, they may still qualify as an affected person and have the opportunity to present to the commission their thoughts and concerns about a proposed location. As I've noted, significant change with 181 is that now that all oil and gas development plans are actually heard by the commission, any member of the public may provide written comment on that plan, or they may also provide oral comment on that plan when it's being considered by the commission. Another significant change that you commissioners have already seen, and members of the public have seen and will begin to see more of, is the change to Rule 502, the variance process. Prior to 181, a variance to a COGCC rule was presented to staff, and the director could approve a variance to a rule. With 181, that process has now been reformed, and any variance request to any COGCC rule must be approved by the commission. There are different types of requests, meaning that if a request for a rule variance is something that is ministerial, meaning generally a paperwork type of request or request for a variance to a paperwork rule, that request could be something that would just be put on the commission's consent agenda. So it would not actually have to be presented in a full hearing. But if the request for a variance is to a rule that implicates public health, safety, welfare, and the environment, that request would actually have to be heard before the commission at hearing, meaning the maker of that request, the operator generally, is going to be the entity making a request for a variance. That operator would actually have to appear before the commission, explain to the commission why they feel it's necessary to have a variance to that rule. Staff would have the opportunity to present its position, and then the commission would vote to approve or deny that request. So those are a few examples of some of the more significant changes that we have seen in the hearings unit as a result of Senate Bill 19-181. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to take those.
Thanks, Ms. Larson, for the update. I also just want to acknowledge and provide my kudos to you and your team for the wonderful work you guys have done in educating yourself around Zoom meetings. and in making our Zoom meetings, for the most part, flawless. I think just as an example, the most recent adjudicatory hearing involving KPK, that went about as smoothly as a trial that I've seen. Having been a trial lawyer before, I can tell you that it was less smooth when we all had to show up in court with boxes of paper. And so really want to appreciate and acknowledge the great work of you and Angelica and Elias and the rest of your team in terms of helping us with that. The other thing that I want to acknowledge is the efforts that you've made to help educate us and the community and operators around the e-filing system. I know that in a perfect world, we would have penned up a different filing system, but this is the one that we were allowed to use. And we had some hiccups with that, and it's gotten better, I can say. And so thanks again for the great efforts there from the hearings unit on the e-filing system as well.
Thank you for your comments.
Others with questions or comments? Okay, seeing none. Mr. Cuthbertson, are we through with the presentations?
That concludes our presentation. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, and thank you and the team for gathering this information and getting it to us. I know everybody's got a full desk of other things, and this was probably additional work that had to be done, but it's just super critical to get this stuff out so that people can see that, it's not only the OGDPs that are getting reviewed, but there's just a boatload of additional really fantastic work that the commission is doing in its oversight of the oil and gas operators in the state of Colorado, and that's not seen or heard all the time. And so I'd love to, maybe hear back in another, couple, 3-4 months and kind of get another update. I think it's really wonderful to see this. So thank you for, and I think also kudos out to Director Murphy for her leadership of all these teams. Some of this transformation of, we're going to put these two departments together over here, and we're going to move finance into this. That's just great. I have no idea how the two of you find time in your otherwise busy schedules to make things even better from a process perspective at commission, but kudos to all of you and to your management team and to all the state's employees as you have evolved through this transformation and continue to evolve with what's been placed before you. So thanks again for all the great information shared today. Okay, with that, we are through with the staff presentation on implementation of mission change rules, part 1. I'm going to go back to Ms. Larson one last time. I did not see Ms. Dugan with us. Did you take another look?
We've been looking and I have not seen her either.
That's fine. So we will, we can probably just move forward. We only have a couple of other smaller items on the agenda. If we could bring to the panel Mr. Lepore and Mr. Pershala for an update. I believe they're going to be providing the update, or maybe it's Dana Strunk. I'm not sure. Whomever it is from PDC that was going to give us an update on the cap, raise your hand and we'll bring you to the panel.
We'll start bringing them in, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me? This is Dana Strunk.
Yes, Ms. Strunk. Hello.
Hi,
We can
yes.
hear you and we can see you.
I believe it'll just be me today. So let me get my
great.
screen set up. All right. Are you able to see my presentation?
Yes, we can.
All right. So good morning, commissioners. Again, my name is Dana Strunk. I'm the Planning and Development Manager at PDC. Happy to be here to give you the third bi-monthly update on the status of PDC's Guanella cap. So this first slide is simply a review of the cap details. There have been no changes to this since the previous update, which was on July 7th. So we're still looking at 32,640 gross acres, or approximately 51 square miles in Weld County. with an average working interest exceeding 90% within that entire boundary and greater than 46% of that pooling threshold within each of the development units within the boundary. We're looking at a total of 25 service locations and 457 wells that we plan on developing over a 10-year period, starting with the build out of the infrastructure. The final slide I have should also look familiar. So this shows the progress of the main components of the cap on the left. The darker portion is where we were at the last update on July 7th. And then the speckled portion that you see shows the progress that we've made over the last 2 months. So as you can see in the orange on the upper left, we feel we're close to completion on all components of the development plan, estimating it at 95% complete. We've finalized the regional alternative location analysis narrative, and now we're completing the detailed ALA reports for the individual locations. In blue, you can see the significant progress that we've made in the last few months on the cumulative impact study, estimating that we're now 45% complete there. We're finishing the mitigation toolbox and building out the emission inventory. For the infrastructure plan in green on the lower left, we feel we're now 80% complete there. We're in the final planning stages, including completing the scope analysis and overall infrastructure plan with both the midstream and electrical service providers. And then we've also seen some progress on the cumulative or the community outreach plan in gray on the lower right, estimating that we're about 70% complete there. So we built out a website that's in place. It's ready for launch as soon as the CAP is submitted. And then we've also begun working on the CAP application itself. So we have an outline in place and are currently reviewing the high-level narrative. In terms of submittal timing, the team feels that we're still on track to hit our goal to submit by the end of the year. We're running on all cylinders, but we want to ensure a complete and well thought out submittal package that aligns with our current understanding of the rules. We're working really closely with the COGCC staff and have found significant value in early feedback from them, as well as the learnings that we're getting from our first OGDP submittal, which will come before the commission in the upcoming weeks. So that's all I have as an official update. So I'd love to hear any questions or feedback that we have from the commission.
Great, thank you for the update. Good to see that progress continues in a positive fashion. Commissioner Gonzalez has a question.
Thank you, Ms. Strunk. Looks like you guys are on pretty good pace to continue this process, and so that's positive, encouraging. I was hoping that you could give us a little bit of insight as to what kind of this CAP alternative location analysis has looked like for you guys, since this is kind of a new process running through and we haven't seen this in an OGDP or a CAP yet. And so I know it's probably not all the way done, but I'd love a preview or just, some insight as to how that's going and what that looks like.
Sure, that's a great question. So in my head, this alternative location analysis on a regional scale is what a planning and development team has been doing in the background at this company. So perhaps we haven't outlined it in any sort of narrative when the COGCC sees it, but when we as PDC look at an area to develop, we do look at that regional landscape, try to understand how many surface locations are necessary to develop the area. It has been nice to have this officially in the rules to be able to defend where we're going to put our surface locations, how we look at them on a regional scale. So what we're trying to do in this CAP is show how each location interacts with each other, as well as come into the specific locations themselves and how we locate them on an individual component. So you're getting kind of the regional view of why we need certain locations in each of the regional areas, and then we come down to the specific locations themselves and show why we get to that, the local place. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps a lot. You mentioned that there were, I guess, a number of development units, as is kind of obvious, but I'm curious how many development units are being contemplated in this CAP, and are the development units themselves driving where the surface location are, or is it vice versa?
It's a little bit of an iterative process there. So each surface location outlines a development unit that we're considering. So there's anywhere from, I believe, like 8 wells to about 36 wells on our largest location. So you're looking at maybe a half section development plan versus maybe 2 or 3 sections. They range in how much surface area that we have to work with versus where we need to develop. So it's kind of that iterative process of where our locations are, where the locations are available, and where our leasehold is.
Yeah, that makes sense. I appreciate that response. I look forward to seeing when it comes through in the cap, kind of fleshing out all the details surrounding that.
Yes, and we'd be happy at the next update to outline where those development units are. I'll take a note of that and make sure that
I think that'd be very helpful to see kind of how the surface locations are scattered and how those development units shake out. That'd be helpful for me, at least, to
absolutely
as one commissioner, to see. So I appreciate the offer there.
Okay.
I think my last question is I'm curious about, your working interest has stayed the same kind of over this process. Are there any plans to boost that, to acquire more working interest within the cap? And how has your coordination been with working interest and unleased royalty owners within your cap? Unleased mineral owners, should I say?
Yes, no, that's a good question. And that's something that we're working on actively. We're saying greater than 90%, but it has moved in the last 6 months. We're looking at all our unleased mineral owners, and then also working with some other operators that hold leases in the area. There are some discussions on trades and things like that, but we are actively looking to boost our working interest. But we feel like greater than 90% is a great start, and anything else we can get on there is helpful.
All right, thank you, Ms. Strunk. Appreciate the update.
Yeah, no, thanks for the questions.
Commissioner Nanjiako?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Strunk. I appreciate the update and the overview. And I would agree with what Commissioner Gonzalez just requested with respect to seeing kind of where the surface locations are being plotted. One other question, I'm sure you probably have answered this previously, but I just couldn't remember, is all of the product going to be piped, or do you have some locations that will require tanks or trucking, or could you just kind of explain? And then I had a couple other questions too.
Sure, yes. So the plan is to have all oil and gas piped off location. We're now working towards produced water being piped off location. That would be our goal. That's not something that's usually done in the basin, but we're definitely looking into it. We see some benefits there, but yeah, I mean, that's one of the benefits of having this regional plan, is to be able to have some lead time to be able to understand what's possible in the basin and what we can work towards.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. And with respect to the community outreach planning, if I remember correctly, are there many residential areas within the CAP location, or maybe just a better question is, what sort of community outreach have you been undertaking so far, like actual interactions with any affected communities?
Sure. So the answer to the first part of your question is we're mostly unincorporated Weld County. We do have some municipalities incorporated within the boundary. We do have surface locations within Greeley, one within Greeley and one in Evans. We've been working with the local governments on that front. In terms of community engagement, we haven't initiated any within the CAP boundary itself. We're waiting for kind of the launch of the CAP to be able to do those community meetings. However, we have had a community meeting for one of our upcoming OGDPs. So we are engaging with the community on some of our previous projects. We engage with them on some of our community relation fronts outside of the CAP. But in terms of specifically with the CAP plans and the community outreach, that will begin once we submit the CAP.
Okay, thank you. I guess I would encourage, to the extent that you can begin some of that, I think it will only help you going forward and to get some questions answered. As you may know, some of our public comments kind of related to this cap. And the one thing, well, let me just ask you, you just mentioned a no GDP. Is it within this cap, or this is separate?
These are separate outside of the cap,
Okay.
yes. Yeah.
And yeah, and I guess I would just note for the members of the public who are listening, you know, the approval of the cap still is separate from the approval of individual OGPs within the cap.
That's correct.
So each of the surface locations will go through the same sort of review, and it doesn't constitute an automatic approval of all of the planned locations or wells. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear to everybody listening. The last question I had is the cumulative impact mitigation toolbox that you mentioned. I'm really interested to see, you know, what that's going to look like. I was curious if you could share a little bit about some of the types of things that you are looking at with respect to that.
Sure, I think that's something that I would need the subject matter experts in to show you. So I might note that and have that individual come this next time and talk about a lot of details within the toolbox for you.
Okay, and I guess maybe part of that question is, are you doing that all in-house? Are you bringing in consultants, or, you know, what are some of the ways you're trying to attack that?
Right, yes, we're working very closely with Kleinfelder, with an outside consultant. So they are working with us on the entire cumulative impact study, including that toolbox. So that's why I would need some assistance there to make sure that we have the information that you need.
Okay, yeah, that would be great if maybe an additional bit of an update on your next report. That would be great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Other commissioners with questions? Commissioner McGowan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Ms. Strunk, for the update today. I know that you all were had expressed in the kind of pre-discussions with us that you were going to try to explore electrification of all the sites, and I'm wondering how that's going.
Yes, no, that is progressing very well. We're engaged with both electrical providers that are in the area, that's Excel and PVREA. They have expressed the ability to work with us, so we're kind of finalizing that scope analysis and the infrastructure plan with those providers. But it is still our goal to have the drilling and the production portion of our operations all electrified.
Great. And in addition to what Commissioner Najapa expressed interest in as part of this cumulative impact study or analysis, I would also be interested in hearing about kind of preliminary thoughts about emissions reductions that will occur as part of the CAP plan, in addition to what's going to be planned for new drilling.
Yes, I will definitely have some of that at the next site, but what I will preview for you is that we are working on what our P&A plan is going to be for existing vertical wells. So we have some that we operate in the area that are planned to be plugged and reclaimed while we're developing this area. So we do have that in mind. We do have a good plan. I'd love to share some of that in this next update.
Great. Thank you. And thank you for allowing us to pepper you with homework. And I think that Commissioner Hackett has a question as well. I think I just saw him in the corner of my eye.
Thank you, Chair Robbins, and thank you for the update, Ms. Strunk. Also wanted to thank you and your staff for the preliminary pre-application meetings that we've had with the CDPHE's water and air divisions. I did want to flag real quick, there was a discussion in those meetings about the tankless, or excuse me, the tank light facility design that that you're hoping to pursue with this cap. And I, did just want to say that it is encouraging for sure to hear innovative emissions reductions plans like this. Limiting storage tanks is definitely a positive step in the right direction that does deserve recognition. However, I did kind of want to put forward that in order to meet our ambitious climate goals and our other environmental protection goals, we really need to make, larger and quicker steps in the right direction. So ultimately, I think the goal really needs to be tankless facilities as quickly as possible. And I know that's not something that's required by the rules, but if operators aren't submitting tankless facility applications, in addition to that tank light facility diagram you've committed to providing us, as well as a description of how that would minimize emissions. I'm hoping to see, along with your application submittal, kind of an explanation of why zero tanks isn't possible in this case, sort of a justification for why a tankless facility might not be necessary and reasonable here. And maybe if you can kind of help us understand what are the barriers for a tankless facility, and if they're not possible today, what sort of steps need to happen to make them possible in the future. And those are, you know, similar types of questions that I have for vapor recovery units, and it sounds like you're already moving in that direction on the electrification plan. So just wanted to kind of add to your growing list of homework if that's okay, and happy to answer any follow-up questions you have about that.
No, I appreciate that feedback. I will bring it back to the team. Perhaps we'll have something in this next update, but I know that that's been a lot of discussions on our end, trying to balance safety with what our equipment list will be. So I'll bring that back to the team, and we'll see what we can do.
Thank you for that. That's all I had.
Thank you, Ms. Strong. Okay, well, I don't see any further questions, so thank you for appearing back before us. We'll look forward to hearing back from you in another couple of months.
No, that's great. It's good to have feedback on what I need to bring for the next update. So thank you all for your time.
All right, we will continue with our agenda. I think the next matter that we have is the consent agenda. We have two hearing officer recommendations, one involving Red Willow Production Company on spacing, and one involving Cub Creek Energy on pooling. I would like to call upon AAG Davenport just to give us a brief understanding of, so Red Willow Production is the production company for the Southern Ute Indian tribe. And I'd like to just sort of put on the record, because we've not had one of these before, some understanding of our jurisdiction relative to the tribe, the MOU, et cetera. So AAG Davenport, can you just provide some background perspective? I don't have any questions about it and am fine voting on it. I just wanted to have all commissioners understand this issue.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I'm happy to. I would note for the commission that paragraphs 3 and 4 of the draft report of the commission in the Red Willow matter do provide some detail as well on this issue. In general, Section 3460-105, as well as Commission Rule 201, which you did promulgate in the mission change rulemaking, provide that the commission does not have jurisdiction to regulate oil and gas development within the external boundaries of what our rules refer to as Indian trust lands and minerals. There is a carve out for where minerals that are going to be developed are owned in fee by persons or entities other than the Southern Ute Indian tribe and the surface as well. The commission does have jurisdiction to regulate where minerals and surface both are owned in fee by persons other than the Southern Ute Indian tribe, to regulate within the external boundaries of the Southern Ute Indian Reservation. As the Red Willow order notes, however, there is a memorandum of understanding from 1991 between the BLM and the commission that effectively allows the commission to regulate in this manner in spacing. It refers specifically to pooling, spacing, and other orders that govern field operations. And I won't go through that MOU in detail here, but what it generally provides is that the BLM does not object to the commission exercising its jurisdiction and authority, and any order of the commission will essentially be treated as an order of the BLM. Of course, there's a consultation and objection process there as well. The tribe, the Southern Ute Indian tribe, does concur with the exercise in that MOU of limited authority by the COGCC, but only with the concurrence of the BLM of the exercise of authority on tribal lands. So that needs to kind of all be considered together when you're looking at this consent matter.
Thank you. Thank you for that background. Just thought it was helpful for commissioners to, and myself, to get a refresher there. With that, does any commissioner have any questions with regard to consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, do we have a motion to approve consent agenda?
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion on consent agenda? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, consent agenda is passed. The last thing on our agenda is commissioner comments. Does any commissioner have comments for the good of the cause this morning? Seeing no comments, I believe we are at that stage of the game in which we need a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All opposed? We are adjourned. We will see you guys next week. Thanks, everybody.